Thank you. Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Maria. Thanks for joining. I can see everybody is putting names and locations into the chat. It's great to see. Yes, as Maria said, I'm the director of International Documentary Association, IDA. I'm a middle-aged man with glasses and a white shirt in a white office. We're presenting this teaching on media consolidation in partnership with Future Film Coalition and Art House Convergence. And Jack Steluca and Kate Markham will talk about uh, those organizations' position on this just in the course of our program today. Uh, in terms of IDA, IDA advocates on behalf of the rights and interests of documentary filmmakers and audiences. And back in October, we made an early statement coming out in opposition to the proposed sale of Warner Brothers Discovery. And then we did so again in December 5, just following the Netflix news. And in fact, we addressed this topic that afternoon in the course of a town hall on advocacy for documentary film that we were hosting that day. Um, uh, for IDA, filmmakers Marjan Safinia and Kirby Dick have been central to the organizing we've done around this. And Marge is actually going to introduce today's program in just a few minutes. For my part, I want to say that IDA is in this for the long haul. We want to build partnerships, build the collective action that we all need to fight this merger and, in fact, to fight media consolidation generally. We're going to hear today how media consolidation in many forms has a negative effect on freedom of expression and the range of creative opportunities that exist for filmmakers and others. You can always follow what we're doing at IDA on this and other topics at documentary.org/advocacy. And in fact, get in touch with us if you have views or want to participate, want to partner with us at advocacy@documentary.org. Bit of housekeeping before we start and before I hand over to Kate to speak on behalf of Art House Convergence. We've turned on captions for this webinar. You can activate that through the Zoom toolbar. And we'll be recording this presentation. Recording will be sent in a follow-up email with resources and materials after the event. And you can also always find materials like that on the IDA website, documentary.org/advocacy. Okay, it's my pleasure now to introduce Kate Markham to speak to this topic on behalf of Art House Convergence.
Thanks, Dominic. My name is Kate Markham. I'm the managing director of Art House Convergence. I'm a white woman with dark hair and dark eyes wearing a chartreuse yellow sweater in a gray room. Art House Convergence is a nonprofit organization dedicated to amplifying, connecting, and advocating for the independent film exhibition community. We do this throughout the year through professional development and networking programs. For independent film exhibitors, this potential merger and media consolidation is a genuine threat and concern. We are very aware of the potential impact that this merger would have on independent film exhibitors, brick and mortar cinemas specifically. The biggest issues being lack of access to repertory films. Warner Brothers has a very large catalog of repertory film that many of our independent film exhibitors find to be their bread and butter. That is where they make their business. We also have been following for many years the windowing issue. Theatrical windows have shrunk significantly over the last decade, particularly with the rise of streaming. We anticipate that being an issue going forward, particularly with this merger. And Warner Brothers also is known to put out tentpole films almost monthly for their theatrical releases. And should any media consolidation and mergers go through, that is also a concern for theatrical exhibitors. theatrical exhibition is a means of survival for the entire independent film ecosystem. Uh, Cinemas are on the front lines of film industry issues, and what affects us affects everyone in the film industry. So we are following this closely. Very grateful to IDA and FFC for gathering everyone together and putting on this webinar.
Hi everyone, I'm Marjan Safinia. Many of you know me. I'm an independent documentary filmmaker. I'm a good troublemaker. I'm a former IDA board member. I'm a current IDA advocacy committee member and also a Future of Film Coalition branch organizer. So um, I believe in advocacy and I believe in art organizations coming together across silos that we're often in. And I think now more than ever, we're in a moment where we have to really get into a collective action mindset. So I'm really happy to bring orgs together in this way, and also to let you know that almost 1,000 people registered for today's session, and that's a really significant sign of where people's feelings are right now about this. I wanted to acknowledge my collaborator in this, filmmaker Kirby Dick, who has been the cattle prod pushing us all forward and has done a lot of work to make sure that the doc orgs are sitting up and paying attention to this. So shout out to Kirby. A lot of people have described this potential merger as being an existential threat to documentary filmmakers, and especially at a time where the funding for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting and therefore for public media writ large has been decimated. And that powerful sort of counterbalance force to corporate media is now under threat. This couldn't be more urgent. Last night, I went to an event in LA for Jane Fonda's Committee for the First Amendment, which I highly, highly recommend everyone on this call joins. And I'll drop the link in the chat in a moment. And she gave a little speech. I'm going to play the part of Jane Fonda now for a minute. And she said that we need to move into a place of non-cooperation, right? And that we need to, as much as possible, gum up the work and throw monkey wrenches into the process and slow everything down. And I want to bring that spirit into our meeting today. Our teach-in will be led by Matt Stoller of the American Economic Liberties Project and Craig Aaron, who's the co-CEO of Free Press, the good one, not the Barry Weiss one. And we're going to run through their presentation, and then there's going to be plenty of time for your questions afterwards. We're asking if you could please use the Q&A box to do your questions so that they don't get lost in the chat. And once questions start to show up there, you should be able to upvote anything that is basically what you were going to ask as well, and that will bring it up and we'll get to it quicker. I just want to say we're at the beginning of organizing around this. Literally the news is changing since yesterday evening till this morning. We've had already 2 shifts in the news around this issue. So we are building the plane as we fly it, and we are trying to stay nimble, and we don't really know a lot of what's going to happen, but we're going to keep at it and keep you engaged. To that end, after this event, in the next day or so, we're going to send out a sort of a survey, which is really to figure out where your interests are in becoming activated around this. And nobody needs another survey before the holidays, but if you would fill that out, we'd be really, really grateful. And that's all for me. I'm going to kick it off by handing over to Matt Stoller of the American Economic Liberties Project, who's going to give us a big picture overview of how we ended up in this place and how we're going to dig our way out of it. Thank you, Matt.
So thank you so much, and thank you for inviting me. I am a middle-aged white guy. I'm wearing a flannel red shirt, and I'm in I guess, a beige office with unpleasant fluorescent lights above. So I write about the problem of market power. And so what I'm going to try to do is kind of run through a brief history of how we got to this place. But I want to just start with something very simple, which is you don't have to pick between 2 deals. Both of these deals look illegal on their face. That's point 1. And point 2, you can make a difference. You as a filmmaker, as a citizen, you can make a difference. But I am going to start with a dark Yiddish joke. So one day I was feeling down, and so my friend said to me, cheer up, things could be worse. So I cheered up, and sure enough, things got worse. So that is, I think, generally the vibe among filmmakers right now. But it's also the vibe in general in America, and in all sorts of places. And I'm going to go into that, but I want to also now inspire you with an old Supreme Court quote from 1945. So this is a judge whose name, and I'm not kidding, was Learned Hand. And this is a very important antitrust decision breaking up Alcoa, which was an aluminum monopoly at the time. He wrote, among the purposes of Congress in 1890 was a desire to put an end to great aggregations of capital because of the helplessness of the individual before them. He was writing about the Sherman Antitrust Act, and that is a law that is still in effect. And he was accurately conveying why Congress passed that law. And I feel like many of you probably feel helpless before the great aggregations of capital. Well, that law and a series of laws were passed precisely because of that feeling, precisely because that should not be how we operate in America. And to give you some historical context, 3 years after Learned Hand wrote that quote, there were the Paramount decrees. And the legal cases against the studios in the 30s and 40s were incredibly important in developing antitrust law in general. A quarter of the antitrust division staff, a third of their staff were dedicated to policing the Paramount decrees for, I don't know, a decade. I mean, it was a major priority for the antitrust division because we've always understood the importance of film, the importance of storytelling. All right. What happened? How did we get from Learned Hand writing that and that being the conventional wisdom and having our government really fighting to keep this industry separated to the place we are today? Well, in the 1970s, there was a decision, I'm not going to go into details, but I can, to prioritize the interests of capital. And there were a lot of different places where this happened. There's deregulation of finance, deregulation of a bunch of different industrial sectors, but it also involved the relaxation of how we enforced antitrust laws. So changes in interpretation, not necessarily, we didn't rewrite those laws, which is why they're still on the books today, but we changed the way that we enforce them. And we allowed for consolidation across the economy. So in the 80s, 90s, 2000s, everything from retail systems to food systems to defense contracting to technology, software, all of it got rolled up. And we're actually in a monopoly crisis today across the economy. And there's a bunch of economic research on that. Prices are higher, wages are lower, healthcare is more expensive. There's all these wonderful impacts, but that's it's a result of the consolidation of power. And that was a policy decision in the 70s to say, you know what, we got to be nicer to concentrated capital. So just to give you a sense today, you guys are part of a very, very frustrated America. So right now, cattle ranchers, cowboys are really angry at vertically integrated consolidated meat packers. There are 4 of them. And they are demanding action from the government. These are MAGA people. They are angry at the same things that you're angry about because they're getting squatted on by dominant firms. There was just an antitrust lawsuit against NASCAR that just got settled last week. So those are NASCAR team owners. Again, a kind of very MAGA heavy group, very angry at the NASCAR monopoly. There are antitrust suits against Google and against Apple from app developers. Again, very upset with vertically integrated gatekeepers, in this case, software. There's a lot of frustration in the video game industry. You can go down the line and you will find frustration that is very similar to what you're feeling about fewer opportunities for people who want to just ply their trade, sell their products, and compete in the market. So one way to understand this is that poultry farmers have been suppressed by, again, consolidated packers or integrated packers as well. There's a term that was invented that came out of the chicken industry. It's called chickenization. It means being dominated by nominally independent, but you're actually being dominated by vertically integrated giants. That's happening across the economy. And right now, Hollywood is in the front lines of being chickenized. So just so you know, the fight that you're involved in, and I really appreciate the statements that the documentary filmmakers made and the fact that you guys are on this webinar and you want to get involved. You're part of a bigger fight in America to preserve not just movies, but cowboys, NASCAR, all the Americana stuff that we love, that makes us who we are. Okay, so the specific way that the media got consolidated, entertainment got consolidated, was the removal of two laws, regulations that prevented vertical integration. So that prevented the filmmaker or the TV product maker from the distributor. So one of those was called the Paramount Decrees. So this is the 1948, and I mentioned this before. It said that essentially that if you are a studio, you can't have deep integrated relationships with theater chains and vice versa. It barred a whole series of business tactics to exclude competitors, and that created an open market in film. Well, that kind of ended, sort of got weakened and weakened and weakened. It formally ended in, I think, 2021 or something like that, but it had been weakened for a long time. And you saw the rise of multiplexes, the consolidation of studios, consolidation of media. Time Warner has been sold many times in this context. The other one is the financial syndication decrees. Many of you know these laws, but the financial syndication decrees, they were a Federal Communications Commission regulation. They said that you have to separate out the TV stations, the dominant TV channels from the production of content, particularly in prime time. And as a result, that you had an open market or more of an open market for television. And those two arrangements created the ability to actually sell product into open markets. And that is why there was an explosion of creativity in American film and TV in the 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s, 2000s. And it's also why there has been a foreclosing of these storytelling industries as well. There is less opportunity to make money, but just less opportunity to actually just sell your content or get access to the market. So when FinCEN was repealed immediately, Disney bought ABC. That was the first big deal, vertical integration right off the bat. And we've seen a lot more of that ever since. Disney's bought a bunch of different firms, moved from a kind of a animated studio with some movies to Imperial Disney. And you've seen this kind of across the board. Netflix was born in this new legal environment native to monopoly, very similar to the arrangement, the legal framework in which Amazon and Google and Facebook were born. And so it's always been far more predatory than the others in terms of its business tactics. And we go into Netflix if we want, but that I can leave it there. Now, so why wasn't there any opposition? Well, the reason there wasn't much opposition to the deals, and the reason there is opposition now, is because until 2016 or so, the laws, the antitrust laws, were dominated. The ones that inspiring quote from Judge Learned Hand, those were dominated from the late 1970s until 2016 by a set of very nerdy lawyers and economists who said, oh, don't worry about business. That's for money experts. And those money experts believed in a very specific form of economics, which which was very favorable to the interests of capital. So they ignored how we had enforced antitrust law for decades, and they just said, well, if we can look at the model in this particular way, if we tweak these parameters, then it could be more efficient, and that's what we care about. And it was very nerdy, and it was very difficult to penetrate. And so we saw consolidation wave after consolidation wave, and people felt like there was nothing that they could do. So starting a few years ago, 2015, 2016, there's been a revival of the anti-monopoly movement. And this really came out of the same things that propelled Donald Trump and populism in the Democratic Party, which is there was a recognition that the financial crisis, too big to fail institutions, was really a problem, and we needed to have a lens through which to understand that. And so since 2015 or 16, there's been this a lot of scholars, a lot of economists and just people in business have said, let's take another look at these laws. You saw in the Biden administration, Lena Khan became the chair of the Trade Commission, Jonathan Cantor at the Antitrust Division. And I'll finish by saying that they did listening sessions in 2022, 2023 to revamp the way that we enforce merger law. And in 2023, they came out with new merger guidelines, which said, here are the precedents of merger law going back to the passage of the Clayton Act in 1914 and then the update in 1950. And we've gone throughout the country. We've listened to people. A lot of people from Hollywood participated in these listening sessions. And here's how we think the DOJ and the FTC and potentially state enforcers should think about the enforcement of these laws. And state attorneys general can enforce them as well. They have been fairly persuasive. I think they've been quoted in between a dozen to 20 court cases, which is a lot since 2023. So there are opportunities to bring this kind of revived anti-monopoly movement into what I think is the real front lines of the challenge of dominant capital in America today, which is, I think, the consolidation of Hollywood and all of the adjacent places that goes from big tech to sports. But the foundation of our culture is really what's under attack right now with these mergers, and you guys are on the front line. So with that, I'll turn it over to Craig Aaron. He is the co-CEO of a group called Free Press. It is a nonprofit that does good things. It is not the it is not the Free Press that Barry Weiss ran and then just got bought by Paramount. So Craig has been fighting the good fight for a long time, and he has some useful things to say.
All right. Thanks, Matt. And thanks to IDA, Future Film Coalition, for having us here today. It's been really fun to conspire a little bit with all of you in the face of a lot of challenges, and appreciate the opportunity, and just really inspired by how many people showed up today. I can see the chat just rolling. It's really exciting to see this kind of energy. My group, Free Press, as we've now very clearly established, does not include Barry Weiss, which is an important distinction. But what we do is we try to organize popular engagement and opposition to things that are happening around media and technology, often in Washington, sometimes in the States, almost always without public involvement or consent. And we're trying to change that. And this merger is no exception. I did try to think of my own Yiddish joke to kick things off and keep up with Matt. But all I could come up with was the punchline, which was, and such large portions, but I still need to write the first half. I did prepare some slides, which I think Maria is going to put up just to keep us on track. And I might call on Matt here to fill in some of the gaps and bring in his expertise as we go through. So I think the first thing to really emphasize what Matt was also saying is what happens when we have these kind of mega mergers is there's a huge push at the start to make them inevitable, to say like it's a done deal and it's all over and you can all go home. And that is certainly something that's happening, even as there's been this contested deal with the Warner Brothers board, leaning toward the Netflix offer, Paramount attempting a hostile takeover, and we can talk about the state of that. There's a lot of incentive for them to create this air of finality and inevitability. And I think we both want to really emphasize that we are much closer to the beginning than we are to the end of this fight. That even if a quote unquote winner is picked here in the next couple of weeks, we're talking about 12 to 18 months of scrutiny and review and opportunity to build political opposition, to encourage those attorneys generals and others to get involved. Yeah, there we go. So the good news is that opposition is already starting. You can see that here with our hosts at Future Film Coalition, the IDA, Art House Convergence. The unions have really been speaking out already, especially the Writers Guild, the Teamsters Local in Hollywood, emerging groups like the Committee for the First Amendment. Move On has put out a strong words about this merger. Of course, ALP and Free Press, groups like Open Markets Institute, others really coming out, speaking out. And a lot of people who maybe haven't agreed on every twist and turn of every policy fight we've had over the last few years, but really understand with a lot of clarity what's at risk if we let these deals go through. So that's very encouraging that already we have so many voices and such clear opposition showing up and speaking out that you are now all part of. I can take the next slide, Maria. Matt talked about this a little bit. I just think it's worth even just looking at Warner Brothers, Time Warner, just like how we got here and the way the path to this moment was paved with failure after failure and disastrous merger after disastrous merger. Billions and billions of dollars have been wasted to push through these mergers, billions that could have been spent on content, that could have been spent on making art, that could have been spent on interesting and creative and competitive content and new viewpoints. And instead, we just spent it on the M&A lawyers and the bankers. So you can go all the way back to the 90s, where you had Time Warner, of course, Time Warner AOL, which some of us are not old enough to remember. At the time, the worst merger in the history, though we keep trying to top that, all the way to the last few years with AT&T coming in, laying off in that time period, something like 50,000 workers, only to see that merger fail, and then only to then spin off Warner Brothers Discovery. So itself a failed project of previous mergers that, of course, when it was touted, was, the great savior and was going to create jobs and do all these things. Of course, the opposite has been true. And that brings us up to this current moment. I'm going to take the next slide, which is what we've been dealing with this year, and it seems like up to the moment the details change. But on December 5th, Warner Brothers announced that it had reached this deal with Netflix. Paramount, swooped in saying, no, our deal is better. And they did what's called a hostile takeover. They went straight to Warner Brothers shareholders, arguing that they have a better offer for the deal. And they're continuing to jockey and go back and forth. Just today, the Warner Brothers board filed with the SEC a detailed document about why they believe the Netflix deal is in their interest, which is a strong indication to shareholders what they hope they'll do, and would be to reject Paramount's merger. Paramount appears to still be pursuing their merger. There could be further bidding wars. Essentially, in the next couple of weeks, I think the shareholders have until January 8th to reject or accept Paramount's hostile takeover offer, while Warner Brothers continues to Warner Brothers and Netflix continue to push for that part of the deal. I think if Matt and I have one unifying message, which is also reflected here in this quote from our colleague Tim Wu, former White House official and antitrust expert who's a professor at Columbia, it's that both of these deals are illegal, or should be, under US law, under the rules that are actually in place. Neither of these deals should be allowed. And so there really are no good choices here, but we can expect to see a period where we may see increased or alternate bids. Certainly they're all playing the political game, which is why you're getting so many leaks out of these companies and seeing so much of that. We can go to the next slide. So I do, even though Paramount, I guess, sort of seems to be down right now, I don't know that they're out. I think it's just important maybe to quickly take stock of what they're proposing to do. And the top headline, of course, is that the deal would combine two of the five biggest studios. And this already follows a big wave of consolidation: Disney, Fox, Amazon, MGM, et cetera, et cetera. So just on its face, this is the part of the deal that I think should be illegal. There are, of course, a lot of underlying problems as well, and a lot of them have to do with the fact that if Paramount were to succeed, they would have control of CBS and CNN, and essentially that's how they're selling this deal. David Ellison, son of bazillionaire Larry Ellison, has essentially said, you should approve this deal because Donald Trump likes us better, and we'll make sweeping changes to CNN. We'll essentially punish CNN for being critical of the Trump administration. That's what they consider the selling point of this merger, along with the selling point that they would cut about 6,000 jobs. So that's what they think the good news is. That's their case for this merger. There are a lot of problems, obviously, with that, and a lot of problems with the nature of the deal. And if you look at what Warner Brothers filed with the SEC, they're raising up a lot of flags in the way that Paramount has approached them and tried to carry out the deal. Of course, their interest is trying to merge with Netflix. But among the problems here, are a big investment, after initially denying it, a big investment from sovereign wealth funds in the Middle East. Until yesterday, Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law, was involved in the deal, although he has now pulled out, according to reports. So he's no longer part of the deal. The reporting I've seen says that the Saudis, the Qataris, the Emiratis are putting in at least $24 billion. But that's probably too low of an estimate here. because they're also the money in a lot of the other Apollo and other places that are getting behind this deal. And, I don't have to tell this crowd, about the concerns of, not just the Trump regime having more power and influence over news and information, but of course the records of countries like Saudi Arabia when it comes to suppressing free speech, independent reporting, and of course up to and including the murder and dismemberment of Jamal Khashoggi for criticizing the regime. These are the folks coming in and saying, we're going to be the new bosses. And obviously, huge, huge concerns, which are not alleviated by the fact, as Paramount is trying to claim, well, they won't be on the board. Obviously, this is a deal that needs an incredible amount of scrutiny and huge problems with already the Trump administration pressuring, shaking down media companies in order to get deals done. That was the story of the Paramount Skydance merger, which is just a couple of months old. In order to get that deal done, the requirements were reach a very specious legal settlement with the Trump administration. That's what most of us call a bribe. The problems were we're going to install a bias monitor watch out for conservative bias on the network and all the other moves they've made, including the installation of Barry Weiss to run the network. That's how Paramount is operating. That's how they're trying to sell this deal to the Trump administration. Right now, the Warner Brothers board is not buying it. We'll see what happens with shareholders. All of that said, we can go to the next slide. As Matt emphasizes, Netflix is not a better option here. The Netflix argument, their political argument, essentially boils down to we're not Paramount, and that doesn't erase any of the incredible problems with this deal, and of course problems that I think filmmakers should be especially concerned about. Top line again. Number one streamer, HBO Max is number 3 or number 4. This is clearly an unlawful level of concentration in the market, in the increase in concentration. On its face, this deal should be blocked. Of course, it's never quite that simple. But those of you on this call really know what it means when we have fewer competitors and more centralized control. We can look at the quote unquote golden age of TV. We can look at podcasting. We can look at film. It's always better when there are more choices, more competition. That's how creative projects get funded. That's how risks get taken. When it's centralized, when it's all under the control of one company, what we get is cookie cutter content, less risk taking, no creativity, and especially fewer diverse voices. And that has been another requirement of the Trump administration as they look at these deals. One of the prerequisites has been companies literally erasing their diversity, equity, and inclusion programs, promising not to pursue any of those goals. And there are certainly no assurances from Netflix that they wouldn't do the same. The unions, of course, are very worried for obvious and good reasons, which there has not been a merger, despite the promises, that does not result in thousands and thousands of jobs lost, lower wages, less lucrative deals, and all the rest that many people on this call already know too well. There's also bad news for consumers. This is not going to lower anybody's bills. This is going to reduce their choices. That means that $17.99 or whatever that viewers are paying, that's almost certainly going to go up. And Netflix is trying to hide really behind the fact that they're not Paramount to sell this deal, but they've done nothing so far to indicate whether any public benefits to this deal. And I think as we go into this fight, as we go into the public debate and narrative shaping over this fight, we really need to start shifting away from kind of the pro wrestling style coverage of the way these deals go down and into putting the onus on these companies themselves to prove any public benefit, which they almost certainly can't. We can go to the next slide. I'm going to call Matt back in here in a second to talk a little bit about the levers and the process. What I kind of want to lay out a little bit for everybody here, again, is that we are early days, but we will have a lot more information over the next 2 to 3 weeks about, is this proceeding with Netflix? Does Paramount, make such a big offer that shareholders go in the other direction? And the next steps will likely be that this will go before the Justice Department and its antitrust division. That is who is going to get to review this deal. And that review itself will take a long period of time. We can talk about, and I'll come back in a second to talk about some of the others who are going to be involved and engaged in this deal. This is going to the Justice Department, and this isn't a Justice Department that operates like previous Justice Departments. And the president himself has been very clear that he intends to be very involved in this decision. But yeah, come on, Matt. I think it would be helpful to share a little bit about what you see in terms of what we can expect from justice and what laws we're even talking about here.
Yeah, fuck if I know what they're gonna do. Um, so this is really a conflict of politics and the law, right? So the law is pretty clear, and the law is called the Clayton Act. It says that mergers that quote competition or tend to create a end quote are illegal, and so. But there's vagueness there, right? What does competition mean? What does it substantially lessen? But the gist is, you kind of know it when you see it, right? Most laws, basically, people coming before a court and saying, yeah, reasonably, you can sort of surmise that this is what happened. I think there's lots of ways of measuring market power and measuring competition. That's why the Justice Department and the FTC came out with these merger guidelines. And these merger guidelines say things like, and they're relying on court precedent, a concentrated market, if two players are trying to merge in an already concentrated market, they are going to be skeptical. That's presumptively illegal. This is a concentrated market. So there's 5 major theatrical film release studios. If Paramount is the buyer, it would reduce it to 4. If Netflix is the buyer, it would probably reduce it to 4. So the last case that we've had where you had a 5-4 change was when Penguin tried to buy Simon and Schuster. That was challenged by the antitrust division under Biden, and it got blocked. These things tend to take between 12 and 24 months from investigation trial to decision and appeal. So that's another merger guideline says that if you're a head-to-head competitor, and you're merging is presumptively illegal. So everybody who's pitching a documentary, selling a documentary, or selling a movie or TV show or something, everybody knows that these companies are head-to-head competitors. That's another merger guideline. There's a bunch of merger guidelines. If you're a entrenched player, I think people generally think Netflix is dominant already. It's entrenched, and they're going to be acquiring someone else. That's another merger guideline. If the deal has a monopsony problem or a buying monopoly problem where it's particularly bad for workers or suppliers in some form or fashion, that can be unlawful as well. That's another merger guideline. That was how the Penguin Simon & Schuster one was blocked. This one likely violates that as well. So there's all sorts of ways to, there's a couple of other merger guidelines that this would probably block. But the thing to understand is, and when the deal finally gets approved by shareholders, they will file a form with the antitrust division. It's called a Hart-Scott-Rodino form, in which they give a bunch of information and say, here's what we're doing, here's our deal documents, and so on and so forth. At that point, the antitrust division can issue what's called a second request, where they will ask for more information, or they can just say we're fine with this deal, and then that second request is a bunch more questions, and then they can choose to make a merger challenge, do a settlement, say if you sell this line of business or that line of business, or you commit to these things or those things, then we'll let it through, or they can bring it to court and say no, we think this is unlawful. And now the other players here are the states. And this is where you come in, because I think when I started by saying, I don't know what's going to happen, this is an administration that is lawless. And so they're going to, Trump could just say at any point, yeah, I want to cut a deal because I feel like it, or pass the thick envelope my way. So, the antitrust division, the legal process is particularly irrelevant, or not irrelevant, but it's particularly potentially secondary in the process. However, every state has a chief law enforcement official, and the Clayton Act, they can enforce the Clayton Act as well. There are also a bunch of state laws that would allow for blocking this kinds of merger. So one question here is, can you get state enforcers to actually come out and say, look, this merger is problematic. It's problematic for, there's a bunch of places where, not just California, where there's filming going on. I see one thing that's interesting is a lot of people are from outside of California. They're from all over the country. You guys can write your state attorneys general. Like, it's called, everyone has a state attorney general. They're all, they work for you, and they don't get that much email. So if you just were to email them or call them and say, hey, I want you to challenge this merger is bad, then they might do it. They can work together. I know Colorado is already leading the investigation. You have some states like Tennessee, which they have a very aggressive Republican state attorney general, Jonathan Skrmetti. You have in Texas, Ken Paxton can be aggressive on these things. New York, Tish James has a bunch of resources and can bring some things to bear. And it does happen. The Kroger Albertsons merger, which was big supermarket chains, the FTC brought a challenge, but then a bunch of states brought their own independent challenges, and that happened in Arizona, and a case against RealPage as well. So I think there's an awareness among state attorneys general that they can't reliably count on the Trump antitrust division, and that they have the authority to do these things. But the problem, and this is where you come in again, is that these challenges can be expensive, they can be time consuming, they can be difficult. You're taking on prestigious lawyers. So they really need to feel like the public has their back. And so they need to feel like people are asking for this. They are asking for them to use some of their resources and challenge a merger like this. Get together with other state attorneys general and challenge a merger like this. So that's the process. They might do that. It's easier if the DOJ challenges it for states to come on board as well, but they don't have to. So I would just encourage, you to focus your energy on the states. I mean, definitely sort of make suggestions to the antitrust division, but they're going to do what Trump wants, not, they don't care what we think. But the states do. And the state enforcers do care what you think. And as professionals in the industry, you matter. And then also some of you might be, have experiences that are relevant for the legal case as well. So you might get interviews or requests from the DOJ or from state attorneys general about your experience in the industry, because when you're trying to define a market, the experience of practitioners in that market is important. So if you have relevant experience, you've tried to distribute documentaries or films or TV, definitely when you contact, elected officials about this, include that. And you could potentially be part of them building the case, part of trying to define the market. So that's how the process goes. It might be the case that everybody challenges this merger. It might be the case that nobody challenges this merger. But part of the question is, how much energy can we dedicate to encouraging a challenge of whatever merger actually gets finalized?
Yeah, that's great, Matt. Thanks. And we can go to the next slide real quickly. So this is everything Matt just talked about. The one other player I'll add in here, though they are, I think Matt's points of emphasis are all correct, is Congress has a role. It's an oversight role, I would say. So if anyone's telling you like Congress will block the merger, they will not and cannot. However, what they can do is things like hold hearings and help create a larger political environment where there's a lot more questioning, use those bully pulpits. So I think it is useful, especially if you do have relationships with members, and even if you don't, to also let them know that you're really concerned about this merger. As we go, there may be others. I think Europe. There's questions about Europe and whether they'll have some role. Certainly, we'll be reviewing a deal of this size. And as Matt said, attorneys general is a really big point of emphasis, and I already see a lot of good chatter in the thread about people identifying AGs, and we can talk as we get into it about how to coordinate some of that. You can go to the next slide, Maria, if you don't mind. So I just had Matt's touched on a lot of this, and I just wanted to emphasize again, as you want to get engaged and involved, like right now, we really are in the shaping how the public thinks about these deals phase of the deal. And the companies themselves have these huge, PR apparatus out there. They're usually mostly using it against each other right now to try to jockey for position in the deal, but they will try to sell this as done and inevitable. And so every piece of questioning that, sharing good articles that you see, speaking out against the merger is useful. As Matt also suggest telling your own story here, incredibly useful. I think both as a political matter, like it's really important we have the voices of creators out front to understand the real impacts of this deal. And actually, as part of the review and the legal process, it'll be really important to provide examples and to show stories. And we're talking with Future Film Coalition about how we might collect some of these into a story bank, the kind of things that can really, you know, bring this home for the politicians who are involved about what the actual risk is, because they're probably not thinking about you. That storytelling, which I know there are so many wonderful experts here, that's really where that comes into play. As this process goes, there will also be opportunities to sort of weigh in officially. Inevitably, there'll be sign-on letters, there will be filings, there will hopefully be meetings with public officials. That's also one of the asks for these attorneys general is, are they going, especially in places like California, are they going to come out and talk to the community about their fears of a deal like this? And we and others will be happy to work with you on that. Before the official process starts, in addition to this kind of work to shift the narrative, it's not too soon to start talking to officials, especially if you have relationships or you have connections there, whether that's attorneys general or senators and representatives. There are a lot of folks who've benefited from how the documentaries, part of their rise, part of their stories. They need to hear about the concerns from this community about what happens if Netflix takes over Warner Brothers, if Paramount reemerges to take over Warner Brothers. And I think the other part here that we've been emphasizing from the top is we need to keep building and deepening this coalition. I put Jane Fonda on here because I think she's really been speaking with a lot of clarity about the risk here to the larger creative community and the threat of any of these mergers. And so I think there's an opportunity for us to continue the conversation, to stay connected. And whether it's through IDA and Future Film or others who are here participating, to connect and talk about how we organize some of this opposition and really raise and amplify the volume of our collective efforts. And I think I might have one more slide oh yeah. So anyway, this is the free press plug portion of my presentation, but we do have some online resources, and if you're interested in kind of keeping up on the twists and turns, we have a little sign up form here. But of course, we'll also be working closely with IDA and Future Film and everybody to Future Film and everybody to keep updated and in touch. And I know that they'll be following up, as Marge mentioned, with surveys and other ways to get involved. So we can skip to the next one. This is maybe for screenshotting. I just grabbed some highlights here of things to read. I really want to emphasize, and I was talking to Marge and Kirby about this, the task for folks on this call is not to be the world's preeminent antitrust expert. You can turn to Matt and his colleagues when you need those kind of details. When we need the legal arguments, there are going to be lawyers who involved working with unions and others who can provide that. What we really need are the personal stories, the personal experiences. But as you want to arm yourself with arguments against these mergers, those are a couple articles that might be useful. Some of them written by Matt and I, as well as others, just from the last few weeks, I think, that make in pretty clear terms, very clear what Matt said at the top, which is these deals are and should be illegal, and these are not our only choices. And then I think that sort of brings us to the end of our portion, only a few minutes over. And I know that there's some, if you go to the next one there, some information about how Future Film Coalition is going to be following up as well. And we can talk about that.
Thank you, gentlemen. What an education. I'm super grateful. And you have fired, I think, a lot of people up here, which was the goal. So you've heard people mention Future Film Coalition a couple of times. It's a relatively new organization. I'm really, really proud to be part of the filmmaker branch organizing team. And what I think is really special about Future Film is that they've recognized that we need an organization in our field who works both across fiction and nonfiction at all levels of the industry and who specifically is designed to advocate for our rights and our needs. So I want to introduce you all to Jack Steluka, who's the interim executive director of Future Film Coalition, and Sanjay Sharma, who's an indie film producer, co-founder, and a board member of the organization, just to do a little minute on how we're going to continue this work. And then we'll come back and do Q&A. So put some questions in the chat in the Q&A box. And Jax, I'm handing to you.
Awesome. Thank you, Marjan. What great presentations. I'm Jax DeLuca. I am a female with olive skin and shoulder-length brown hair and glasses. And for some of you who might not know about Future Film Coalition, this is a new organization, as Marjan mentioned, that it will be advocating for the independent film sector. And our goal is really to unite independent film professionals and organizations to build collective power and secure visibility, resources, and public policy protections that will fortify this independent film ecosystem to ensure that audiences can benefit from a diverse and thriving cultural landscape for generations to come. And the reason why Future Film Coalition exists is, while we all have been increasingly facing issues within the industry, many of us have not been doing that work to engage policymakers to really help them understand the needs of this sector. And more significantly, and I saw this firsthand during my time at the National Endowment for the Arts as their film and media arts director, most policymakers don't even know that we exist as a distinct sector. And so while film is a $229 billion industry in America, within this economic engine, independent film serves as a talent incubator and a driver of innovation, and a lot of the creative successes in our field lead directly to economic growth and entrepreneurship, and also contributes to America's global position as the world's premier talent pool. So, however, while most people think of the film industry as they think of the film industry as big studios and Hollywood and Netflix. They're thinking of the big players, but our industry is really predominantly made up of small businesses, many of you on this call, and many of you who are also affected by policies and regulations that are often built to favor the consolidation of power. So while we've been invisible in policy conversations, our goal is to change that. And this coalition is not about defending the status quo. It's also about reimagining what's possible when we can work together as one. And earlier in the month, Future Film Coalition posted a Substack article called "Why Independent Film Can't Let This Mega Acquisition Slide and What We Can Do to Help Protect Independent Film." So we'll put a link to that in the chat, and know that we are committed to working in coalition with you as individuals and other organizations in tackling this issue. And we know that this is an issue that has been affecting this ecosystem long before the Brothers Discovery sale became a headline. So we picture this as also a long-term thing that we'll be working on. So here's what you can expect next from us. We will be sending out regular updates in a variety of ways with opportunities to get involved. Everyone registered for this event will receive a follow-up email by early January with specific updates about the Warner Brothers Discovery sale and next action items. We'll work with Craig and Matt to help develop language and strategy for reaching out to senators and representatives and state AGs. We'll also work on opportunities to collect testimonials and stories. As Craig and Matt both mentioned, the storytelling component is critical for this. You don't need to become an expert in antitrust law because you all have the relevant expertise that will be useful to providing information for regulators. And so our goal is to help each of you articulate the harms of media consolidation and relate this to your direct experience as part of the ecosystem. And so we'll be organizing that and help guide you through that process efficiently and effectively. And so we want to be ready when the time comes. Another way you can get involved is by volunteering on the Future Film Coalition Working Group on Media Consolidation. We'll send information about this early next year in January 26. And you can also subscribe to the Future Film Coalition Substack for additional updates and news alerts. And also IDA They have an advocacy blog, and that's where you can also get more up-to-date news on this issue. And also, I believe a recording of this event will be posted up there as a resource. So that's at documentary.org/advocacy. And you can also reach out to IDA about how to get involved at advocacy@documentary.org. All right, I'll now pass us back to Marjan for the Q&A portion of the session.
Awesome. I had said Sanjay, but Sanjay, are you with us? Are you going to pop on, or are we covered?
All good. Thank you.
Okay.
Here to support. Thanks.
Sanjay Sharma, everybody. Okay, so we're gonna jump to Q&A, just table setting. I'm so excited to see so much energy in the chat about what can we do, what can we do. That's what we love. So within the next couple of days, you're going to get an email from IDA to everyone who registered here, and there is a survey there. And the survey is going to ask you things like, what's your zip code? So we know which reps you have. Are you interested in volunteering filmmaking skills? Are you interested in talking to electeds? Do you want to share some stories with us to be able to pass along to the organizers? So we're trying to capture all of that. As I said at the beginning, we're building the plane as we're flying it, right? It's all sort of fast moving. So when that comes, if you could fill that out, we'd be really, really grateful. I'm going to invite everyone, so maybe Dominic, Jax, Craig, and Matt, if you guys come back on camera, and we're going to start popping through some of the Q&A. I'm assuming everyone can be on the screen at the same time. I'm going to start with Mr. Breckenridge. What a great name. Mr. Breckenridge would like to know, what documentary stories can we tell that show the ills of virtual integration capitalism, and how can we organize around it? So the reason I'm sort of reading it out, even though I just said what I said, is that we hear a lot from folks who are not filmmakers. Hey, we need the storytellers. We need your talents and your creativity. And then rarely do we get followed up with any kind of direction on that. And we are, many of us are directors. We appreciate good direction. So I'm going to punt it here. I know we don't have all the answers yet, but can you give us some broad brushstrokes of how a creative community can contribute to this fight in an effective way?
Yes, but I want to be a prima donna director if I give you direction.
Listen, documentary has a low bar. You are
Okay.
welcome anytime, Matt.
I can't work with these people. All right. So look, I think that you can do a full documentary. That would actually be really awesome to see a full documentary on this merger activity. Just watching the business press, it's kind of incredible. And I do look at it as more like a farce than anything else, because these are not like gods or monsters. These are just people trying to grab stuff. But I think that just in terms of being able to really affect the discourse on the deal, I would try to do really quick interviews with industry participants, just saying and put them out on a podcast. And he was talking about.
Sorry, no, you're back.
You're good now.
Sorry. Yeah. Andy Richter came on. Ben Stiller argued on Twitter and just said, hey, this is like a bad deal, and et cetera, just arguing with someone. And it was like, okay, Ben Stiller's against this deal. Andy Richter came out on a podcast and said, there's less work today and there's only 3 places to distribute. And so everyone's trying podcasts. But he didn't know necessarily that he was making a legal argument, right? He was just talking about the industry. But just having people in the industry just saying, I pitched a documentary to Netflix and I pitched a documentary to HBO. I don't know what that would mean if those 2 things were taken over. And just putting that, so I'm a documentary filmmaker, just putting that minute-long clip online would be useful, because then we can include it in our materials. And then, the DOJ, antitrust attorneys across, states will say, oh, I want to talk to that person and understand, what's going on. When these guys talk about we're pro-consumer, we're amazing, and we're great, having a video clip of someone who's in the industry being like, I did this, and this is where I'm from, this is, broadly, and I could just tell you that when there's been this consolidation that's happened here when Disney bought Fox or whatever other thing, it just became harder for me to distribute. And I know that is not true or whatever it is. But like, I think the idea of just doing like a big documentary or a documentary that takes a while to put together, is really useful. But I also think there's opportunities for just much sort of shorter ways of doing it, and it doesn't have to be really produced. Like you guys are all storytellers. If you're just at a dinner party or something and someone has an interesting anecdote, I mean, this is your superpowers. You can tell what's interesting. Some of you, but you know, you can you put up like a put up a camera in there and just be like, hey, would you say this, and say you are, and just say that thing. And that's the kind of thing, like, oh, we need that chorus to come out and push back against, the narrative coming from Wall Street that this deal is inevitable, that it's legal, that it's pro-consumer, that it's pro-innovative, et cetera, et cetera. Like, we have to push back against that narrative, and that's where you can do it. But I would encourage like quick interviews that go up online, on Twitter, on YouTube, as well as, traditional documentary approaches.
Yeah, and I might add just I agree with everything Matt said, and I think where sort of campaigners and organizers, like, it's really easy. We get lost in the weeds pretty easily. Like, I think Matt and I are trying hard to fight against that and talk about these things in ways that hopefully break through. But once this becomes a thing, it's like the Justice Department and they're fighting and there's SEC filings, like, we really lose the thread very quickly. So like creative approaches that can really find the right examples, the right analogies. Like, Matt and I met first working on net neutrality, like not exactly like the sexiest issue that there ever was, but part of the reason we won is because, the John Hodgmans and the John Olivers and folks started explaining it, because Burger King of all people made like a fake ad about burger neutrality that like translated the issue for a popular audience. So where those like creative sparks are coming, that's really useful. And we're always happy to come in and say, oh yeah, like, make sure this is the wrong ask or this is the other thing. But where we really need the energy and where we'd be happy to do some strategizing is, what are some new and interesting ways to actually talk about this to the public in ways that will break through, that like somebody, putting on a suit every once in a while and going to hearings in DC isn't going to come up with on their own. So I really sort of take to heart this I think very reasonable critique of, like, people are always coming being like, creators create, and then we kind of stop the conversation. So I think the next step is, how do we really commit here, going into 26, to pull together some conversations and a little bit of strategy to be like, what could we be doing and how could it be different?
I want to just get out, if you're asking for direction. So this is a book called Born to Be Wired. It's not a good book, but it's by a guy named John Malone, who's on the board of Warner Discovery. And it is, if you read it, it's his autobiography. If you read it, you'll really get a sense for how these guys think and how they operate. And I feel like you guys could tell the story of, and each board member is like that, right? And you guys could tell the stories of these people. One of his pathological fears is being embarrassed in public. I mean, there's some leverage there.
It's an invitation.
Yeah, I mean, this guy basically structured Hollywood. You may or may not know who he is. He's hid in the shadows, but he clearly doesn't like movies. It's just not very interesting to him. So there's really actually weird and interesting stories that you could tell, that's just like from a fiction, from a perspective of a storyteller, it's cool. But I would also say, I would encourage people to just sort of like anonymously, like, I know there's a lot of fear of retaliation. So if you have ways of sort of cloaking voices, like, that actually is kind of alluring for someone to say, I don't want to give my voice, I don't want to tell who I am, but here's something that I've noticed. I can't get stuff into, talk about China, a fear of retaliation, passing anonymous notes, like saying, I got this from a friend, and here's what they think. That is very common. It's very common in
Yeah.
all industries. Fear of retaliation is a thing in America now because of consolidation everywhere. Everyone from chicken farmers to, I mean, I said this earlier, that so that sense of fear is something to draw on. And then if the more people who come out and say, yeah, this is a problem, the harder it is for people to retaliate. So that is actually a thing that, like, the more you can get people to come out, the more it's going to be like, yeah, they can't take revenge on everyone. And then also this is existential, right? If we don't block these deals, I mean, they can retaliate, but there won't be a hot. There's not going to be that much. I mean, it's already really bad. So, there's probably not going to be an industry to come back to if we don't block these deals to some extent. So that's
a cheerful closer from Matt Stoller.
well, the upside is if we do block it, and it is
That's
very
right.
possible to block it, then you go on the offense, right? Because we know the existing model is not good.
Yeah.
So, the other point here is we need to restructure the industry, right? Because if you block this deal, like let's say Netflix gets blocked, Paramount is still going to have really serious problems competing unless you restructure the industry. And that's true. Like, so same with Comcast. So you're going to have potentially some allies in saying maybe there's some alignment with creators and some of the smaller studios. And then that's where you kind of start to build the argument for a new kind of financial syndication decrees in the streaming era. And then also, I don't know if you guys have noticed, but this is a very angry country. And it's likely that Congress is going to change pretty substantially in the midterms, and that there will probably be a change in control. Well, there will be a change in control in 2028. This is set up, right? This is like this is a to restructure the industry in a useful way if we can get a challenge. So it is grim, but the stakes are high, but it is also,
Opportunity.
there is a huge opportunity here to make your industry work again.
Yeah, I want to just underscore, I'm really glad you brought this point up, that we're not just trying to preserve a system that's already failing us. We're trying to leverage our collective power to be a visible and kind of influential force in building and shaping something for the future that's better for us. And I think that applies to the public media conversation as well, that our community has been very involved with. And in the survey, we're trying to find out from you if you're interested in doing some of this storytelling. And so just to be a dead horse, please fill out the survey. And the 1A committee is doing a lot of this stuff. So they've just made a partnership with the Groundlings, and Jane Fonda's doing these kind of very funny little short, social videos, poking fun at all of this, right, with comedy. So there are lots of ways for us to work on it, but we got to build the muscle. So that's part of why we want to bring us into smaller groups so we can start to build that muscle together. Okay, I'm going to plow through some questions. I'm just going to take Jax's quickly here in the chat. Can you ask Matt about any recs for people who aren't willing to come out openly with stories because they may be actively doing business with Netflix and worried that it could be a loss of revenue? So basically, how do we keep people private? I'm just going to answer that quickly, which is like we can be trusted with your stories, and then we can figure out how to make that work if people are very much in those precarious situations. So just reach out to one of us that you know and you trust, and we'll work on making that work. Okay, I'm moving back to the Q&A. Keep putting your questions up there, folks. This is from Jennifer Posner. Craig, hey, from your old media organizer pal. Can you discuss how much, if any, the role the FCC is playing, re Brendan Carr's intention to lift what's left of the remaining ownership caps we still have left on the books? Obviously, the antitrust issues are beyond just the FCC, but in the age of Carr weaponizing the FCC as an enforcement arm of the White House, I wonder if there's anything you think we need to be doing re the FCC.
Great. Always love the FCC questions. Hi, Jen, and so glad you're here. I do want to shout out Jen Posner's work. She got a graphic novel coming out that describes all of this work in really accessible terms. So be on the lookout for that. That's going to be huge. And I think the point I was just about to reply this in the chat is, yes, all these fights are connected and intertwined. The FCC itself is not going to review this merger, but they're right now pushing for huge consolidation in broadcast television to remove any limits on how many stations one company can own. It would be and again, these are the next stars. These are the Sinclairs. These are the people that took Jimmy Kimmel off of the air, that have, again, like CBS and Paramount Skydance, been willing to twist and warp coverage to win favor from the administration to push through their deals. So these are other spots, for resistance to look at, what happens when there's too much concentration. There's also, I see discussion in the thread about public media, and you raised it too, Marge. Again, the more we connect these fights, the more people see themselves as part of it. I think the better chance we have to push back. So if you're obviously a filmmaker, you're very concerned about HBO versus Netflix, but you also need to be very concerned about the, ITVS losing 86% of its funding, the just gutting of public media and how much work that's eliminating. Our opponents, if you will, see the connection, and that's why they're pursuing on all of these fronts. So while there are opportunities to step in here, there's the FCC right now has a proceeding on Nexstar Tegna, on the review of ownership rules. Those voices matter there as well. And we talk about reconstruction, we talk about sort of winning the reconstruction, which is how I like to think about it in sort of Matt's construct of like what could happen next. Our solutions also need to cut across mergers. What does public support for non-commercial media look like? And of course, also talking about how we unwind and deal with the reality of this incredible concentration of media at the local level, which is only getting worse and which itself really is a byproduct of our broken political system. The reason these local television stations are so valuable is because of election ads. So there's this relationship there. And anyway, all these fights are absolutely interconnected. And happy to share more details with anybody who wants to know how to get involved in the FCC end of this fight. We were talking before, there was a FCC oversight hearing today during which senators repeatedly asked the chairman of the FCC, aren't you an independent agency? It says on the front of your website that you're an independent agency. And during the hearing, they deleted the words and changed the website, which is just like a minor example, but it's so exemplary of how this administration is moving in this time.
Can I offer a couple of observations about things to be? So first of all, I forgot to mention this. There are also foreign enforcers. So this deal is going to be reviewed all over the world. So you can get foreign enforcers to act. Usually they're leery to do it unless American enforcers are acting as well. But you can get the Europeans, the British, Singapore, Australia to try to block this merger. Often they'll try to cut deals, but for their own offshoot jurisdictions. That's a leverage point. Another leverage point is, a lot of people, you guys, candidates call you for money sometimes. Tell them that this is your thing, that you care about this. They don't know that and they don't hear it, so tell them. And then if you are in the fortunate position of having candidates annoy you and call you for money, the third thing is, one of the things that's happening right now in California is that most politicians in California are not taking a position on this deal. Some are. Ro Khanna is. Laura Friedman, had a meek statement, but finally said, "Oh, I don't like consolidation." Tom Steyer in the gubernatorial race came out against it. But this is a major asteroid heading for, and California politicians are not taking a stand on it. Mostly they're saying mealy-mouthed things like, "Oh, my North Star is the weather is workers. So whatever deal happens, I'm going to be looking out for workers." Or they're talking about tax credits. And they need to be nailed down. Like they need to be nailed down to take a position against these deals. And so you need to push them. I mean, Ted Lieu is a Los Angeles congressman. You will not find somebody who is more favorable to big tech and does not give a shit about the people he represents, even though he's like very anti-Trump. Nail these guys, right? Tell them that they need to block this deal and don't let them escape with weasel words. Like Adam Schiff did this weasel word thing. And I forgot who Padilla did the weasel word thing. Don't let them escape with weasel words. Just push them and say, "I saw your statement." You can look it up online. Just Google who your member is, and just be like, "I saw your statement. That's not okay. This is going to destroy my livelihood. You need to come out against this merger," and let them know. And they may not change, but right now they need to feel pressure from their constituents because right now they're afraid.
Yeah. I remember the early days of 2017 when Indivisible put out their how to talk to your MOC guide, and suddenly the internet was flooded with videos of regular folks going to speak to their reps and taking up space in their offices and jamming their inboxes. It is really effective. It does actually work. We will be working on circulating for those of you who are shy to call your reps. But let me tell you, it's a really good way to get your daily frustrations out. Just get that thing on your speed dial and call them and tell them what you think. It works wonders for one's mental health. But if you're shy about that kind of thing, we're going to do a few talking points about this and distribute those to you so that you can get on the phone with your reps. Ted Lieu is West LA, if anyone is West LA here, one district over from me. And I concur with your assessment. Okay, I'm going to ask Natalie's question. Is there a way for newer to the industry folks can communicate with reps effectively, even if they don't have specific experience to point to? Like how this will stagnate growth for early careers. I think it's everyone, right? We want everyone.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think speaking to your fears and actually your again your personal experience, your position with the organization within the industry is really essential, right? Like these are the stories that need to be heard, and this is where, for politicians and political actors, like they need to be concerned about, and if they see younger people newer to the industry also voicing opposition, I think it really goes a long way, combined with folks who've obviously been part of the industry for a long time. So it's all about, making it personal, and it's okay for you to speak to fear, to lack of opportunity, to things that you're never going to potentially be able to do that others were able to do. Those are all very strong and powerful narratives that are useful to the politicians and part of building the case against this merger.
And similarly, Linda asks, are there more specifics that are useful beyond just saying there's not places to sell my dog? Although I think that in and of itself is valuable, right?
Yeah, I say all the specific. I mean, whatever specifics you have are useful. So, um, don't think that your story, your experience is what they need to hear, and that is how they will build the larger narrative potentially against this deal. So, um, whatever that experience is, or whatever possibilities you see that endanger your work, that is useful. So it doesn't just, I mean, obviously, the competition aspects are incredibly important. So if you have examples, or if you can paint the picture of what it means to negotiate deals, that will obviously have a lot of resonance. But other experiences, just as a worker within the industry, as someone trying to do creative work and being able to describe how creative opportunities have been cut off, all of that is useful. So, probably whatever you have to say, don't think, oh, they won't care. It's actually that we need more personal, specific, real world examples. That's actually what breaks through,
Yeah.
as opposed to everybody coming in with the same talking points. And we're happy to, help get the ask right and the specifics. But it's actually those individualized stories that break through for decision makers more than just pure numbers and things like that.
Yeah. And the aggregate of all of our stories,
Well,
right?
and also these are people who are, they just need to know you're not crazy, right? They just need to know like you're a real person who is actually in this business, and you have, you've thought about it. And if you send in a story that's just like, this is what I do, this is a real threat, or if you talk to them and just like, here's what's going to happen, like that's very powerful, because they represent a lot of people. They get a lot of crazy people talking to them. They get a lot of lobbying pushes. Their information, you can't assume they're all corrupt. A lot of it is just like their information ecosystem is just, they're surrounded by money, and they don't necessarily see it. So all you have to do is seem credible, and just seem like, hey, I'm a normal person, I've thought about this problem, and here I'd like you to do this thing. And that can be very powerful. I've seen members of Congress change their minds because a random business person in their district said, I can't get my app or my thing sold in this particular distribution channel because this company is blocking it. And I want to. And, I'm a constituent of yours, and I'd like it if you did. And that has changed their mind. They didn't see the problem before. So you can't assume that they understand the problem. Um, and if you communicate with them and you don't sound crazy, then they will be much more likely to listen. I mean, obviously, they're going to have some 23-year-old reviewing the correspondence, but there are different ways that they filter that correspondence upward, and I don't think you should assume they're not going to listen.
Yeah. And also
Yeah,
they
and the
have
local piece too.
They
I
have
just want to
congressional
emphasize that.
town hall, they have town halls, telephone town halls. There's a lot of ways to get yourself on their radar. Um, I see a couple of questions here that I'm going to sort of fold into one because I feel the same way too. We have a question from Seth and a question from Anderson around diversity. So certainly in the documentary field and the film field in general, we've been fighting for maybe the last decade to really create a more equitable, racially equitable environment and a more diverse environment in general. And I think this is actually a very good story for all of us to tell. I mean, we have put years of work into trying to level some playing field. And if the condition of one of these deals is going to be, but you got to get rid of all your DEI initiatives, that is a very powerful story. So anything
Yeah.
on that,
I,
like underlining
I
that?
mean, my view is this absolutely needs to be central to our pushback and our discussion. And this is again where telling your personal story really matters. And I think that, the way that corporations have met this, unconstitutional and ludicrous attack on even the most milquetoast diversity initiatives by very quickly sacrificing it, very quickly running away from it. I think it's a disgrace. But I think the mistake we make is, oh, well, now these guys are here and we can never mention race or diversity or racial justice again. So if that's your story here, I think it's really important that it be told. And that, I think part of the politicians in particularly need to hear is that they're not being rewarded for running away from these fights and all this work and these voices. And I think in terms of fears and the story of consolidation and how hard it is to get a foothold and always has been because of the way these systems have been set up from the very start is an important part of this story.
Mhm.
Obviously, know your targets, know your audience, the more personal and local you can make it, the better. But I think this is where these corporations and all these deals have both shown their true colors in a lot of ways and really failed their own employees, their own creators in a really fundamental way that we need to be calling out, not pretending didn't happen.
Yeah.
Can I just make a point about DEI, which is, I think you should, I wouldn't center it. Diversity is different from DEI. One of the things that I think we've seen is that's just harder to get weird stuff distributed, right? It's just harder to get, you know, like no one in FinCEN was put in place in the early 70s. No one said we need more diverse stories, but because it opened up a market and people wanted those more diverse stories, they wanted people that they didn't that looked like them to be on TV. That's what the networks ended up buying. So I would just say, look, if you care about diversity, cutting the number of distributors from 5 to 4 is going to radically reduce the ability of people stories to tell to get on through our distribution channels, and that's true for rural conservatives, just as it's true for Black people, just as it's true for LGBT stories, right? We're all like, if you want to do something that's outside the consensus, that's outside the mainstream, you need a diversity of channels, and that's what's always fostered creativity. Like fun stories always come from the weirdos, and if you don't a bunch of distribution channels, you're not going to be able to get those weird stories out there. So I think DEI it's a little bit of a hot potato right now, and I think for some legitimate reasons. I don't want to get into a discussion about it, but I think you don't need to say that to make the point about diversity. You actually have a really strong argument on diversity that encompasses conservatives as well as the groups that I think Hollywood has really tried to foster. So that's like the way I would put it is it's just like, look, if you want to sell content to America, you need to have an industry that looks like America and that can distribute a bunch of weird stuff and figure out what sticks. And right now we don't have that, and this will make it worse.
Yeah. Appreciate that, Matt. Okay, we are going to wrap up. So I'm just going to do a 1 minute question. Should we all be canceling our Netflix accounts?
Hate the game, not the player.
Hate the game, not the player. Although there was real value, right? We saw with Kimmel the value of people pulling,
That's true. Yeah.
suspending. So
Yeah, and the threat there could be useful, but I think the energy needs to go into opposing the deal, putting pressure on these political actors, building the larger opposition. We want everyone's work to be seen, and some of that work is there. I think we can talk about boycott strategies if and when they make sense, but I think the priority here
The
is really derailing and disrupting the deal.
the reason they're trying to buy Warner is so that you can't cancel, or if you do, like you're not gonna have
You're out.
choices, right? The point is you
Yeah.
can't boycott because that's what monopolization's about, right? They're just like, oh fuck you, we're raising your prices and you can't do anything about it, right? So I look, you don't want to subscribe to Netflix, cool. It's not that great, but I would just say like part of the dynamic is we're trying to empower, consumer choices, including boycotts. And if Netflix buys another whatever 120 million subscribers through Warner, they're not going to care if they get a few cancellations. So that's what the fight is about. And in a sense, you know, the inability to boycott is part of the case against the deal.
Absolutely.
I
Yeah.
agree with that.
Okay, I'm gonna start to wrap us up. I'm gonna ask Dominic to put his camera back on so he can actually talk us out. But I will just say one more time before I pop off the camera. I love your energy, everyone who's been here. I'm super grateful, Craig and Matt, for your energy. And we're just at the beginning. So get in touch, stay in touch. If you have follow-up questions, email advocacy@documentary.org. We can use that to channel your emails to the right and appropriate people. Fill out that survey and stay fired up because we can't lie down. It's not the time to lie down. We just have to build a new muscle and get information and Beyonce the shit out of this. There you go. There's my closing thought. And with that, I shall hand it back to Dominic.
Thanks a lot. I'm just going to end by saying just a word of thanks and a word about next steps that others have said already. So, first of all, thanks to Craig and Matt for everything you've said and given us today. I want to say to everybody that we continue to work with Craig and Matt on tactics around this, including messages to communicate to representatives. Thanks to Marge, of course, and Kirby co-organizing that, and to Jax and Kate. I want to say, like Marge, I'm also a branch co-organizer for Future Film Coalition, and I know, as we all do, that the building partnerships across our field and other fields is going to be so important for this. And so that's what we want to do moving forward. And if you want to be involved, of course, we've said a couple of times how to get involved, including through the event survey, which you're going to fill in. In terms of what to expect next, as Jack said earlier, we'll follow up in January with updates on the Warner Brothers story specifically. Volunteer if you are interested in getting involved in that way on the Future Film Coalition Working Group on Media Consolidation. Subscribe to Future Film Coalition Substack, and you know already about IDA Advocacy blog for updates there. So if there are more, we'll share also some of the links and resources which so many of you put into the chat and into the Q&A, and we'll make that available too. So thanks for joining us today. If we need to do more sessions like this, we absolutely will. This is just the beginning, as everyone said, but thanks for being part of this today.